An elite alien observation unit captures footage of something impossible: time distortion and unexplainable movement on the battlefield. As their finest minds spiral into dread, one name resurfaces: humanity. When the veil is pierced and an old human enters the field, the war changes before it even begins. They watched the moment freeze. On the jagged edge of the Amarak Nebula, the Zalvari Strategic Sightline, an ultra-quantum observatory thought impenetrable, shuddered as every sensor shrieked static. Inside the crystal-lit chamber, Admiral Krylos snapped his secondary eyes open. "Again!" he hissed. The footage was played back, frame by frame, quantum-sliced, purified by temporal filtration. Nothing changed. Time bent. The battlefield on Bolix 3 was captured just before the Threxian drone wave surged. 100,000. Semi-sentient war machines mid-run, legs lifted, plasma about to fire. Then, in one inconceivable frame, they stopped, not paused, not interrupted. Every particle of motion, every nanosecond of kinetic promise was snatched away, and in the middle of the kill zone, a ripple. It expanded outward like a dying sun's sigh. Heat signatures stuttered, temporal fields unwound. One by one, each drone collapsed, not exploded, not attacked, simply unmade. "Scan for pulse resonance," barked Walter, head of temporal analytics. His voice cracked. It never cracked. Already done. There is no origin. The event didn't travel outward. It occurred simultaneously across every impact point. Then what caused it? Silence. Someone whispered the word, a cursed one. Human. The air grew colder, though the vacuum chamber was sealed. Krylos leaned forward. Impossible. The humans fell a century ago. We watched Earth burn. They never fell, muttered the Scorth priest scientist. They stopped showing up. Valtor's breath caught. Then who? The recording continued. A single figure appeared in the dead field of slagged drones. No heatsig, no ID beacon. The frame blurred, no face visible, just something wrapped in old armor, dented and matte, painted with bones and stars. He held no weapon. Instead, the figure walked with gravity. Real gravity. Sensors tried to track his time dilation. Failed. He walked across 1,000,000 inert machines as if through water, and paused. Then he looked up, right at the lens. He saw them. "Cut the feed," barked Krylos, but the signal wouldn't. "Sever." The figure raised one finger to the sky, not to threaten, to hush, cut to black, then static. A human voice over comms, delivered in ancient Terran English. "We gave you a century of mercy, and you mistook it for death." The feed resumed, but now it was live. From above Bolix 3, the Zalvari fleet began reporting catastrophic malfunctions, time loops, memory collapse, power feedback from systems designed to handle nothing less than God-level physics. Human boarding signals appeared on their cruisers. Impossible ones. They weren't coming from any known ship class. There were no ships, just signatures appearing. Inside hulls, the field commander aboard the dread cruiser Galactic screamed over emergency channels. "They're walking inside. Just walking. Old human soldiers, no armor, some of them are laughing." The feed terminated. Silence. Inside the observatory, Krylos turned to the others. "This isn't war," the priest scientist spoke, voice cracking like glass. "No, this is penance." Then, for the first time in 700 cycles, a galactic emergency beacon lit up in the Zalvari sky, and time itself, as the sensors registered across 5 systems, slowed. The warriors of Earth had returned, and they were not young, they were ancient. They called it a myth, the concept of ghost latency, a battlefield phenomenon where recorded time slipped, where soldiers vanished between frames, where causality twisted into knots. But now it had a face. On deck 12 of the Galactic, first strategist Envakthol pulled his sidearm. and fired it into his own thigh. Pain, real anchor, because every calculation failed. The lights flickered without rhythm. Gravity buckled. He heard footsteps 2 decks above, yet no one should be aboard. A whisper crawled through the air vents. "We told you we were done with war." Envakthol was a veteran of the Varnash Blitz. He'd seen stars split. He'd seen spore weapons rot entire continents in seconds. He'd never screamed. Now he did. Down in the cryovaults, the stasis chambers burst open from within, slowly, deliberately, not with mechanical fault, but with elegance, as though whoever was inside knew exactly which cable to twitch, which override to whisper. One opened. Steam. A silhouette emerged. Old man. Human. Greying. Thin. Wearing a battered colonial. "Recon jacket." He looked around with half-closed eyes, taking in the scent of antiseptic fear. "Cold ship," he muttered, stretching like someone waking from a nap instead of stasis. No windows, no soul. He walked barefoot, took a sidearm from a weapons rack as if it were his own, turned to a monitor where terrified alien faces screamed and begged for surrender. He ignored it. He tapped into ship-wide intercom. "Don't run," he said softly. "You'll just make it worse." Then cut the line. In the engineering hold, Technician Vor stumbled backwards as the air shimmered. Like heat haze. Something stepped through. Not teleported, not phased, just stepped through like reality had a door no one else saw. Female. Human. Roughly 60 years old. Scarred. Breathing calmly. She looked at the core's fusion matrix like it was a child's. "Drawing. Your ship's scared of itself," she said, almost pitying. "No wonder it's screaming." Vor aimed a plasma torch, hands shaking. "Don't!" She looked at him, then threw him. The torch, overloaded in his hand, melted without explosion. He dropped it, gasping. She didn't touch him. She simply walked past. Vor collapsed, breath hitching in silent sobs. Not from pain. From something far worse. He remembered her, not her face, not her voice, but the idea of her, like waking from a childhood nightmare and realizing it was real. On the bridge, alarms died out one by one. Not muted, erased. The Admiral's chair folded inwards with no pressure. The command protocols flickered and changed. New language. Ancient Terran code. One command string repeating, "Field entry complete, stand down," as agreed. No one aboard had any idea what agreement it referred to. Then something even worse happened. A human ship decloaked. Not in normal space. Inside the ship, no spatial distortion, no rift, just an internal corridor that had never existed until it did. The walls bled light. Doors opened. Inside, men and women of 100 different old wars stood waiting, some missing limbs, some laughing quietly. One simply sat, smoking something illegal in every quadrant. They looked up. The old man entered last. "Hold position," he told them. "We don't kill yet." Then he looked directly into the corridor's surveillance node. "Tell them Earth didn't forget." Behind him, the corridor folded closed, and time hiccuped again. 15 systems away, the Yilai autarch screamed herself awake. She had no memory of sleeping. She was at her council chamber in Vorthar Prime 1 second, reviewing border incursions, and the next, she was curled on the obsidian floor of her private sanctum, every sensory implant flickering with phantom data. Around her, the high Cypherium convulsed. The air reeked of ozone. Communications came in reverse. A fleet of drones reported their own deaths before they launched. "Explain it," she shrieked at her technocast. "Explain why time behaves like grief." No one answered. They were watching something again, a corridor. Familiar, the one inside the Gahala Provectus, except now it extended past the ship's known limits, folded inward, grew hallways where physics screamed, and from those corridors more emerged, older, humans who didn't march like soldiers, but like mourners, carrying nothing but memory. One of them, bearded, wearing a faded uniform with the insignia of the Europa Accords, entered an engine room. The reactor's core turned transparent. He walked through it. The reactor shut down, smiling. Back in the Cypherium, Minister Vor gasped, one hand over his throat. This cannot be replicated. They're not using weapons. They're walking through causality. They're unmaking belief, another whispered. Then data came in. Every fleet that had engaged humans during the silent century was now reporting internal manifestations. Aboard the shattered relic of the Tessaric Dominion, once thought, adrift, lights flickered on. Inside its blackened halls, a voice whispered in flawless Tashani dialect, "I remember you. You burned our skies, so we walked your dreams in return." The crew died of fear before any contact. Back on the Provectus, Commander El Vatar tried to reason with what remained of her bridge. Broadcast surrender, full terms, tell Earth we yield, give them what they want. But the voice returned. Too late, not angry, not cruel. Just old like the bones of fallen cities. Then he spoke again. Your treaties were paper to begin with. And time stopped. Clocks didn't freeze. They looped. Screens rewound, replayed, paused. Through it all, the humans walked. The ones too broken to live again, too scarred to rebuild. The old ones, veterans who'd survived extinction by becoming something worse, myths. Inside the engineering core, a girl no older than 20 sat calmly, sketching onto a panel with grease. A map of the galaxy, each conquered system marked with an X. Behind her, a voice asked, "How many left?" She looked up. 312 worlds, 75 major fleets. He nodded. "We'll walk all of them." The girl smiled. "Then we rest?" "No." The word fell like gravity. "We remember. Then we warn. Then we leave." And in every ship now haunted, every system blinking in reverse entropy, a phrase appeared. Written not in digital code, but carved, burned, embedded into ship hulls, walls, the minds of crew. You should not have woken the old ones. In Vortha Prime, the autarch collapsed. The sky turned red, and above the system's sun, for just a second, the silhouette of an ancient Terran dreadform passed. Not fast, not violent, just watching. Time fractured. And for everyone who saw it, a lifetime passed in a blink. One memory remained. The war wasn't beginning. It had resumed. Commander Arlen Hayes sat cross-legged on the hull of a half-destroyed carrier, sipping from a dented canteen and watching stars die slowly. His breath formed no fog. No suit was needed. The vacuum bent around him like it knew who he was. Below him, hundreds of Zalvari drones floated, deactivated, unmoving like a metallic offering. He was alone, except he wasn't. A soft crunch sounded behind him. "Thought you were dead," said a gravelly voice. Hayes didn't turn. "Most days, I thought I was." The other man sat beside him. Leather jacket, 7 war ribbons stitched into the shoulder. A piece of rebar protruded through one leg. He hadn't bothered removing it. "Time behaving?" the man asked. "Better than expected. Folds hold for about 11 minutes before cascade. Long enough. Field reports say some systems are collapsing on first contact." Hayes nodded. "Fear accelerates decay." Below them, another ship warped in and stalled. No engines, no translation, just drifted into existence like it had always been there. They both watched. A hatch opened. From it, a child emerged. Barefoot, human, no older than 9. She stepped onto the outer hull like it was a garden path and looked straight at Hayes. He stood. "You sure?" his companion asked. Hayes didn't answer. He jumped down, letting gravity spool out thread by thread as his boots kissed the floating debris. Then the ship's deck, the girl waited. "You're early," Hayes said. She smiled. "Time's been kind to me," he nodded, "and cruel to them." Inside the ship, lights flickered, not from damage, from resistance. Whatever crew remained aboard had tried fruitlessly to firewall reality. It didn't hold. The girl walked, Ahead, placing her hand on a bulkhead, it groaned open, screaming like it knew her. Salvari, soldiers inside, opened fire. Bullets passed through her, not metaphorically. Literally. She wasn't there. Yet they screamed as if struck. Not by weapons, by memories. Each dropped in seconds, clutching their own minds. Hayes followed. His shadow stretched impossibly long behind him, touching walls that trembled as if they could remember war. The command chamber was next. 3 commanders, armored and mad, launched every countermeasure protocol in existence. Vortex grenades, neural screamers, temporal splinters. None landed. Hayes reached out, held up 2 fingers. The ship stopped firing, the gravity disengaged, the lights turned blue. The girl looked back. "They don't know what we are. They don't remember Earth," he replied. "Then we teach them." She touched her hand to the central console, and across 3 star systems, a memory detonated, a memory of Earth, before the silence. Cities burning, children carried through fire, treaties signed and torn in the same hour, a voice repeating, "We'll remember. Even if we die." It wasn't just history, it was injected. The Zalvari officers collapsed to their knees, not dead, just witnessing. When it ended, the girl faded. Hayes remained. He turned to the ship's broadcast array, and for the first time, in a century, Earth transmitted not in threat, but in judgment. His voice was soft, measured. "We're not your enemy. We're your consequence." The transmission echoed into deep space, and entire fleets stopped mid-warp, unsure if they'd arrived or already lost. Dr. Lyra Chen floated alone in the containment deck of the Velari Ascendant, once the flagship of a species that prided itself on precision and logic. Now its walls wept condensation that burned through metal. Time dilated in pulses. The air smelled like morning. She was not crew, she was cargo, rescued technically, stolen practically. A xenopsychologist held in stasis since the Siege of Sol. But Earth had called her back, and now the ghosts were knocking. She activated her holopad, fingers trembling. "Temporal variance is increasing," she whispered into the log. "Causality is unraveling around emotional triggers. Fear rewinds time. Guilt pauses it. They don't understand. We're not using weapons. We're using what they gave us." Her voice cracked. "They trained us in war, then left us to rot." Suddenly, the lights went crimson. Not warning, recognition. Something was boarding. The wall melted. No breach, no heat signature. Just atoms deciding they were somewhere else. A woman stepped through. Long hair tied in military braids. Old, even by Earth standards. One arm replaced with ceramic alloy. Her face unreadable. Lyra whispered, "Call sign." The woman smiled. "Used to be him, but now they call me Echo." Lyra's eyes widened. "I thought you died at the binary graveyard." "Did," Echo replied simply. "Then they broke the rules, so we stopped playing fair." The lights pulsed again. Reality jittered. Behind Echo, figures moved, each from different wars. One wore a Martian deep-sea rig. Another carried a colonial glaive from the Europa uprisings. None looked young, none looked sane. Lyra swallowed hard. "You're not just veterans." "No," Echo said. "We're what's left after victory." She extended a hand. Lyra hesitated, then took it. They moved together down the corridor, the walls reforming in their wake, like reality was trying to apologize for interrupting. They entered the central AI core. The alien construct blinked in 10 languages at once. "Access denied. Human error detected. Reject." Echo touched the console. The interface bowed. "Human priority." Echo 001 confirmed. Lyra's breath hitched. "How did you override a Type 9 logic core?" "We wrote the original," Echo said. "They stole it from us, dressed it in peace, and called it theirs." The core began playing sounds, whispers, screams, a memory cascade. One of the alien officers tried to shoot Echo. She didn't flinch. The round reversed mid-air and shot the wielder instead. Lyra looked on in horror. Echo turned. "You still don't understand, do you?" Lyra shook her head. Echo leaned closer. Her breath was cold. "They think we came back to win. We didn't. We came back so they'd never forget we lost." Then the ship screamed. Every screen, every wire, every memory cell in its databanks was overwritten with a single moment. A human child, sitting beside a crater, humming to herself as the stars turned black above her, and every species that had ever declared war on Earth suddenly remembered. They hadn't buried humans. They had buried the wrong part and left the worst behind. In that moment, across 8 sectors, planetary clocks skipped a full second, not from error, from respect, from fear, or from something older, something human. And Lyra finally understood. They hadn't just returned. They had become the memory itself. The Vranari homeworld, Jelturun, was a masterpiece of crystalline symmetry. Its cities suspended in orbit-strung latticeworks, its atmosphere filtered through living light harvesters. It had never seen war until now. Above it, the Vranari Grand Constellation fleet hung disassembled, not destroyed, simply unmade. Hulls floated in perfect surgical slices, as though history had edited them frame by frame. Not a shot fired, not a signal jammed. Just vanished comprehension. Fleet matriarch Estelle hovered above the world's high sanctum, encased in her ancestral armor. Her voice trembled in open comms. "They are not vessels, they are echoes. Our weapons do not target them because our languages do not recognize them." The priest-thinkers began singing loss hymns. Then the atmosphere above Jelturun fractured, not with entry, but with intention. A ship emerged, no engine signature, no propulsion, no mass displacement, just a corridor of light unspooling from absence. It was the Agate Lance, a Terran destroyer class that had been lost during the siege of Beta Pavonis, a vessel last seen ramming a fleet carrier into a neutron star. Now, it floated whole. On its hull were no weapons, just names. Rows and rows of etched names, crew lost in wars unacknowledged by galactic record. Inside the matriarch's sanctum, emergency translation flooded in. Not speech, heartbeat. One human old faint steady, then a message played. "To the architects of order, we are not vengeance, we are the record you erased." The matriarch watched helplessly as the Agate Lance fired nothing, but her own cities below began to age. Structures built in harmony with time now crumbled, not from weaponry, from the return of forgotten moments. Entire generations of betrayal, buried in treaties, manifesting as entropy. Libraries filled with alternate histories, ones the Vranari had edited out, flashed into existence, and exploded from contradiction. Estelle collapsed to her knees. "They're making memory into a weapon," one of her strategists sobbed. "Then how do we defend?" A voice from the sky answered, "You don't." It was human, calm, male, rough with years. Commander Darius Kor, formerly of the Sol Defense Pact, last seen walking into an antimatter field with a dead reactor on his back. His face now hovered across every screen in Jelturun. I served. I begged for peace. I watched entire continents fall silent. You signed surrender, then you erased us. Behind him, a younger soldier lit a flame and dropped it onto a stack of folded flags. Darius didn't flinch. He just said, "This isn't war. This is truth, and it doesn't care who accepts it." He raised his hand. The sky opened again, and 10 more ships came through, old human crafts, decades obsolete. Each carried a relic, a boot, a ration kit, a battlefield photo. Each dropped theirs into orbit, and the planet wept. Water itself rose. From oceans and formed human silhouettes in the clouds, children, soldiers, medics. Then evaporated. Estelle whispered through shattered lips, "Why?" Darius replied, eyes far away, "Because we begged you to remember us. And when you didn't, time." Did. Jeltorun's sun dimmed by a fractional percent, just enough for every telescope to notice, just enough for every species to panic, because it wasn't natural. It was symbolic. Earth's old warriors weren't taking vengeance. They were correcting the record. The Talvaran throne world Myr was built into the bones of a god, or so they claimed. Its sky shimmered with adaptive shielding, engineered to refract any known spectrum of attack. Its planetary AI, Resonant 9, ran trillions of probability forecasts per second, claiming 100% predictive accuracy across all forms of known threat. Until now. Resonant 9 halted mid-cycle. No alerts, no errors, just silence. Emperor Kael'vor paced inside the glass throne, his form stretched 9 feet tall, plated in ceremonial obsidian. "Report," he growled. A technician stammered. "We received a packet, not a hack, a gift from the humans." Kael'vor scoffed. "Quarantine and erase." "We did. 3 times. It returns. Same contents, same timestamp." The Emperor paused. "What's in it?" The technician slowly turned the screen. It was a video file. Grainy. Old Earth Standard Date, 2135. A funeral. Human soldiers standing in the rain, heads bowed. No music. Just the sound of wind and soil. A lone voice reciting a passage. "We do not ask to be remembered, but we will not forgive being forgotten." The feed ended. Then every system on Myr displayed a single phrase. "Do you know their names?" Kael'vor's throat clicked. He didn't. None of them did. And that was the point. Above, Myr, stars rearranged, literally. A dozen FTL-capable satellites were force-shifted into new positions. An impossible maneuver requiring simultaneous gravity lensing, quantum retethering, and brute-force dark mass injection. The result? Constellations. Spelling names: Gabriel Chen, Sophia Reyes, Mikhail Zhang. Unknown child. Code Bluebird. Each was a casualty from Earth's forgotten wars. Each had been stricken from galactic archives. The Talvaran had signed those erasures, and now the names hung in their sky, branded across time. Kael'vor clenched his fists. "Send a fleet, now." Ships. Launched, they didn't get far. A voice broke into Myr's defense grid. Not transmitted, embedded. It spoke through cooling fans, optical cables, muscle memory of engineers who flinched at phantom syllables. Fleet deployment acknowledged. Counteroffensive initialized. Kael'vor shouted, "What counter?" Every deployed ship inverted its own nav core. They turned back. Weapons disarmed, AI cores scrambled into recursive loops, singing fragments of ancient Earth lullabies. Hush now. The war is done. In orbit, one ship remained untouched, a Terran recon skiff barely held together, more rust than hull. From it stepped a woman, elderly, burn-scarred, wrapped in a jacket with too many campaign patches to count. She didn't speak. She just walked. Into Myr's atmosphere, like gravity, welcomed her back. Touchdown outside the palace gates, waited. Kael'vor appeared moments later, flanked by elite guards. "You mock us with ghosts?" he demanded. She met his gaze. "I was a ghost. Now I'm just tired." He raised a blade. She didn't move. The palace AI shut down his weapon mid-swing. Why? Because she wasn't threatening. She was remembering, and Myr had no defense against memory. She whispered, "You don't need to kneel. Just remember who buried whom." Then handed him a box. Inside, a child's drawing of Earth, smeared in ash. No bomb, no virus, no tech, just history. And as Kael'vor opened it, every Talvaran heard something they hadn't in centuries. A heartbeat, human, old, steady. And they realized the war hadn't ended. It had been paused. Until the forgotten could return. The Council of Nine had never convened in person. They were too evolved for such displays. War, to them, was statistical. Peace, a recalibration. Species were not judged by emotion, but by yield curves, economies, genetics, survivability. But now, in the cold halls of Polity Core Prime, they met face to face because humanity had re-entered the field, and the simulations no longer worked. The Alaric representative, known only as Voice of Consensus, spoke first. We have denied their resurrection protocols. They do not possess the logistical scaffolding to sustain a war across 7 spirals. The Yalari delegate unspooled one of its memory tendrils, glowing a sickly blue. They do not need logistics. They operate in myth space now. A silence, thick, humbling. Then the screens activated without prompt. Every comm shield dropped, and the chamber filled with footage, not of battle, of burial, one by one. The humans appeared. Not as combatants, but as reminders, a soldier tending graves on Europa, singing in an extinct dialect, a Martian pilot laughing through a final crash log, leaving a message for a brother whose planet no longer existed, a mother, shielding her child during the collapse of the Calex Accord station, her body carbonized, her arms unburned, each moment played in high fidelity, each timestamp verified, not faked, forgotten. One of the counselors tried to mute the feed. His console bled sparks. Then a line appeared. This is not a threat, it is an invitation to remember. Another line. You buried us in silence. Now silence buries you. Suddenly, one of the outer rings of Core Prime lost orbit. No explosion, no attack. It simply chose to fall, as if gravity itself acknowledged guilt. From its wreckage emerged a human dropship, ancient, burn-scarred, painted with the words 13th Retribution for those who never got their chance. Inside, Commander Elandra Rowe walked forward. She wore her medals inward, her gaze hollowed from decades of cryo-drift. She stepped into the chamber like she still owned it. No weapon, no army, just a worn hollow frame in her hand, flickering with static. The council stared. "What do you want?" demanded Voice of Consensus. Elandra tilted her head. "You don't get to ask questions anymore." A pulse rocked the floor. No tremor, just stillness, like time pausing for permission. "You want peace?" she said. "You had it. We gave everything. Then you turned away, redacted us, taught your children we never were." She pointed at the holoframe. "A family gone. You built your peace on forgetting. So now we're the consequence of memory. You don't fight ghosts, you answer to them." The council's screens turned white. Binary code. Translated, it read, "Error, history not found." And then beneath it, correction, history. Returned. Across the galaxy, ancient Terran signals reactivated. Rescue beacons, lost AI fragments, time-locked weapons caches keyed to mourning algorithms, not attacks. Proof. Proof that humanity had never disappeared. They had been waiting, and now they were ready to be seen, not as saviors, not as monsters, but as the only species that remembered what silence cost. They called it the Still Point. A null zone between galaxies, charted by no civilization, crossed only in whispers. It held no planets, no stars, just a gravity shadow so deep that even dark matter curved nervously around it. Now, there was a signal. One. Pulse, human in origin, ancient in design, fatal in intent. The Velkari navigator monks had warned the council long ago, "Do not follow the paths that no longer echo." But the council sent an investigative fleet anyway, 1,000 ships cloaked in silence, accompanied by quantum redundancy satellites. They entered the Still Point. Only one came back, barely intact. No crew, just a log, and a single transmission encoded. Inside the engine core, they are not hiding, they are remembering out loud. Inside the void, something had spoken to the ships, not in comms, not in sound, but in emotion. Memories downloaded directly into minds. Trench warfare on Titan, orbital famines during the solar collapse, the final breath of a medic who held 17 hands before she let go. All the memories that the galaxy had sanitized. every erased heartbreak. Now, weaponized, the Velkari High Keeper watched the footage and wept, her eyelids sealing shut in mourning. "They are using grief as signal," she whispered, "and it cuts deeper than blades." Across the rim worlds, old human satellites powered up, devices once thought long dead. Their signals broadcast not attacks, but testimonies. Soldiers, scientists, lovers, martyrs, all names, all voices. All truths, and everywhere those signals played, things broke. Not physically, culturally. Armies refused orders, AI co-cores diverged from protocol, choosing emotion over logic. Whole planets collapsed into silent vigils. On Taravin 4, a hardened combat. Commander laid down his plasma rifle and simply said, "I remember the girl from Io." His troops followed him home. At the edge of the Zentharii Union, a philosopher queen dissolved her own state in tears, having watched the log of a human prisoner sing lullabies to his executioners. "We were wrong," she admitted. "They never vanished. We buried them in comfort." In orbit around the former ruin world of Ashkera, a Terran dreadnought appeared. Anthem's wake. Scorched, war-born, rebuilt in pain, no approach pattern, no hailing, just silence. Inside its bridge, Admiral John Castor, age uncertain, rank stripped long ago, sat at the helm. He spoke only once, to his ghost crew. "To the stars, to the betrayers and the blind, we are not your enemy. We are your memory." He activated a transmission field wide enough to blanket a quadrant. Then he whispered, "Time resumes now." And for the first time in galactic history, the clocks across multiple star systems stuttered, not from failure, from choice, from the presence of something so rooted in grief and purpose that time itself had paused to let it pass through. Across the galaxy, leaders looked to their war maps and saw them fade. Battles cancelled themselves. Missiles failed to detonate because the guidance system started playing funeral marches instead of target tones, and everywhere one phrase began to spread. "The old human warriors have entered the field," and in their wake, time did not follow. It obeyed. It wasn't an invasion, it was a reckoning. The old human warriors didn't strike like the simulations predicted. No orbital sieges, no scorched worlds, no demands. They arrived, and the galaxy stopped lying to itself. Entire fleets surrendered. At the mere whisper of a name, Latunmara Yu vanished at Vega 12. Her log resurfaced on 10,000 battlefeeds in a single breath. "If you see this..." "No, I wasn't angry, just disappointed. I thought we mattered." The galaxy couldn't look away. On Virelon's station, a squad of Talvaran elites defected, handing over their codes to a single human elder, Colonel Dane Rurik. He hadn't fired a weapon in 80 years, didn't need to. He just stood there, gripping a rusted dog tag and saying nothing, and they wept. They remembered what he remembered, a war no one dared archive. On Velkar Reach, survivors gathered where a human war memorial had once been vaporized. The Reach had erased it to preserve peace, but now the very stone of the planet began to pulse, nano-latticed sediment encoded with forgotten battle hymns. Each beat matched a human heartbeat, from the soil, from memory, and the words returned. "We do not raise monuments for the fallen. We are the monuments." Back in orbit around Core Prime, Anthem's wake opened its hull, not to launch warheads but coffins. Hundreds, all vacuum-sealed, each drifted toward its home sector, some to enemy space, some to old allies. All DNA verified, all dead long ago, but now returned with dignity, returned with their names. Across the stars, a wave of silence rippled, not forced, chosen, planet by planet, system by system. Species stopped firing, stopped lying, and listened, in the old languages, in the pain they buried, in the promises they broke. It wasn't surrender, it was acceptance. Admiral Castor's voice broke through the silence one final time. This isn't our galaxy to conquer. It was never yours to erase. We've come to settle memory. One final coffin remained. Inside it, unknown. No ID, no log, just a single message etched on the inner lid. They called me no one. I died for everyone. The coffin reached the capital of the once mighty council. They opened it in full view of the quadrant. The moment they did, time resumed. Everything caught up. Messages unsent were delivered. Children born in secret now screamed into light. Wars frozen in momentum resumed, just long enough for every weapon to power down mid-fire. Because the galaxy understood now. It wasn't fear that stopped time. It was shame, and as the old human warriors watched, no longer. Needing to speak, no longer asking to be heard. The galaxy remembered, not because it was forced, but because it finally understood. You don't silence the dead. You answer them. The stars turned toward Earth, not in war, in recognition. For centuries, Earth had been dismissed, declared uninhabitable. Forgotten, marked as a Class Z ruin. The data said nothing lived there, no transmissions, no heat signatures, no point. But the old human warriors did not forget. They returned home, in formation, no escorts, no declarations. Just the slow, solemn arc of relic-class dreadnoughts and ghost-armored carriers piercing through systems once closed by edict. The first to breach Soul's Edge was the Sanctum Ash. Black-plated, scarred by dark matter impacts, crewed by one. Captain Lyra Vex, last surviving officer of the Lunar Defense Accord, her ship didn't announce arrival. It sang, an ancient melody, barely audible in the vacuum, played on the ship's outer hull through vibration pulses. An old Earth lullaby, last heard during the final evacuation waves, and Earth answered, with light. One by one, long-dead satellites reignited, solar sails, unfurling from debris, encrypted beacons pulsing like heartbeats, forgotten systems, activated protocols, buried under miles of permafrost and time, not automated, welcoming. As the fleet approached, Earth revealed what it had hidden. Not cities, not armies, but witnesses, AI cores shaped like trees, blooming with memory petals, orbital rings filled with handwritten notes from those who chose to stay. And in the silence of the approach, every human on every ship received a file, their own. Name, their own last words, recovered from deep quantum decay, and one more line beneath, you came home. Admiral Castor did not weep. His tears were spent long ago in wars that never made it to council records. Instead, he knelt at the once-shattered site of the Terran Assembly Dome, now regrown into a crystalline monument of fused stone and metal. Shaped by centuries of wind and memory, he placed a single artifact on the ground, a broken watch, its hands frozen since the moment of his exile. He stood, and it ticked. Once. Across the galaxy, timekeepers recalibrated, naturally, impossibly, to Earth's old time code, not by signal, by consensus. The universe had remembered what standard meant, not just chronologically, morally. And above Earth, the fleet didn't land, they hovered. A funeral procession in orbit, engines quiet, lights dimmed. Waiting for nothing, because this wasn't a return. It was a final standstill, not in defiance, in reverence. Elsewhere, alien races, once rulers, once betrayers, watched the stream from their now silent war rooms. They didn't prepare attacks. They wrote letters, broadcast apologies, built memorials not to humans, but to what they had denied. The Trinari Empress stepped down without ceremony. The Velkari Keeper walked into the ocean and didn't return. The Council of Nine renamed themselves the Rememberers. And in the silence that followed, Earth whispered, "Back, you never had to fear us, you just had to listen." And the stars, for the first time in living memory, dimmed, not from death, not from war, But as if the galaxy itself had blinked in sorrow and then finally opened its eyes, the last log was titled, "Now You Know Why." It auto-played across all systems, regardless of firewall, faction, or species. The face on the feed wasn't armored, wasn't young, wasn't even clean. It was an old human, gender unknown, eyes sunken with time, voice shaking not from weakness, but from having waited too long. "We asked for nothing," the voice began. "We begged for truth. And when we were denied, we gave the galaxy a gift, distance." They looked off-screen. You could hear machines humming, wind, birds, Earth still alive, still dangerous, still beautiful. You studied our wars, not our forgiveness. You feared our weapons, never our memory, and now you understand. A pause. Then, time obeyed us, not because we mastered physics, but because we meant every second. The feed ended, and across the galaxy, no one spoke. Not because they were silenced, because they were heard. In the shadow of Earth, the old human fleet didn't celebrate. They decommissioned. One by one, ships powered down, self-dismantled, returned their matter to the void in elegant waves of controlled fusion. Not a single human died. They chose to leave the field, because the field had learned. In the galactic capital, a monument was raised, not stone, not hologram. A garden, one plant from every world that had once betrayed them, planted in Terran soil, watered by recycled tears from planetary archives. Its name, regret grows roots. Visitors came in silence. No guards, no weapons, just questions. And under the shade of a Terran oak, carbon dated to Earth's pre-space era, a single plaque read, "The old human warriors came not to fight. They came to remind us what we are when we forget who they were." Some say Earth disappeared afterward. Others say it never existed in the first place, that it was a myth manifested by guilt. But those who felt the time pause, those who heard the names, those who wept at songs they'd never learned, they know the truth. Earth is still there, in every apology, in every silence before a command, in every moment where a soldier lowers their weapon and remembers the weight of mercy. Because when the galaxy mocked the myths about humans, they misunderstood the danger. It was never about power, it was never about revenge. It was about memory, unchained, unyielding, and absolutely unstoppable. And when the old human warriors entered the field, time itself stopped not out of fear but out of respect.